Hello, I'm Kim Peake, co-host of Our Voice, set here locally in Boise, Idaho at the Downtown Grove Hotel. Today we are honored to have a very special guest for you. I want to set this up for a little bit by sharing with you the story of Eritrea. Maybe you haven't heard of Eritrea. It's a country in Africa bordering the Sudan and Ethiopia. In Eritrea, this country of 6 million people, thousands flee every year as refugees seeking freedom from the repressive government. For far too many of them, though, this is where their nightmare begins, as they are taken and kidnapped and held for ransom, often tortured, raped, and abused. Today, we are honored to be joined by Meron Estefanos, who is going to share with us her efforts to tirelessly free the captives and the Eritrean refugees. She does this through her radio show based in Sweden, and also sharing through a documentary entitled The Sound of Torture. Meron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're thrilled to have you. And could you just share a little bit about your background, your life in Sweden, to give our viewers just a picture of your life?
Well, I grew up in Sweden. I'm originally from Eritrea. I'm a single mother of 2 boys. I do radio, and my phone is always ringing with different issues with refugees that have all kinds of problems trying to solve or help out.
So, and speaking of the Eritrean refugees, so how did you get involved in, learning of their plight and then getting so involved to help free them?
It was never planned, actually. It was when in 2002 until 2004 I actually moved back to Eritrea, thinking everything is good. I had no idea how it was down there. Life was good for me. I was a Swedish citizen, and so that kind of was not fair, because I was living like a queen while my childhood friends, people the same age as me, have been in the military, serving unending indefinite national service. Basically what it means is you are a property of the regime in Eritrea. When you are 17, 18, you are conscripted and you never return home. Maybe every 3 years you get permission to visit your family. But in the military, it's not like the U.S. Army or the U.S. military.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So you're referencing 2002, 2004. So that's like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So what changes have you seen in the situation of the country over that time as you've been involved?
So the 2 years that I was there, as I said, for me life was really good. But seeing my childhood friends, the life that they had was just unacceptable for me, because I grew up in a democratic country like Sweden. You go back to one of the most repressive regimes in our time. Right. So it was just not something that I could accept, and I did not want to raise my son at that time in Eritrea, so I decided to go back to Sweden. Okay. And when I get back, it was just, I saw people that supported the government, that claimed everything was good in Eritrea, and that kind of drove me crazy. I was saying, no, actually it's a very corrupted country. People get arrested for whatever reason, even saying that you're hungry can be interpreted something else. It can imply something else, and you can get arrested for that, because then the government can say, are you trying to say there is hunger in the country?
Right. So
anything can land you in prison. So I was speaking up about the things that I saw in the 2 years that I lived in Eritrea.
Okay.
And so slowly, without me realizing, I was opposing, and people started singling me out. They don't want to be friends with me. I became a traitor in their eyes, and so one thing led to another. So then slowly I became an activist, and being an activist far away from Sweden to Eritrea it was very frustrating. I couldn't change anything.
Right.
So I joined a group, a movement that was by young people, young Eritreans, and we happened to have a radio that was broadcasting into Eritrea via shortwave, and they asked me if I wanted to join them. That's how my radio journalism started, actually. And
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So if someone told you 15 years ago you would be doing this, you probably would not have believed it.
No way.
No way. So it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah.
I mean, I did just kind of grow as you helped one person and then helped another person, and and then there was just kind of this wave of people now that look to you for hope.
Yeah, I think it was frustration that led from one place to another place. At the beginning, and I thought that things will change right away. As I was focusing more on human rights, the political issue, teaching the people about what is dictatorship and what is democracy and things. But then, after about 3 years, I think I got frustrated. I felt that I was not contributing much. I felt that I couldn't reach the people. They were too far away from me. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to focus on refugees, because at least these refugees, I could reach them.
Right.
I couldn't go back to Eritrea, but there were Eritreans all over the world that needed help.
Right.
So then I decided to focus more on refugee issues rather than focusing inside the country. And that's how my work with refugee issues started as well.
So you say, Eritrean refugees all over the world now. So did you feel like when you started, it's like, wow, once the world knows the situation, people will do something about it?
That was the thought. Yeah.
That was the thought. That was the hope.
Yeah.
And so, in the past 15 years that, this has been building and become really your life's work, it seems like, are you seeing progress?
Yes, more and more are opposing. I mean, they're breaking their fear. And when we talk about, a lot of people probably think, okay, you have left the country, what do you have to fear for? But our government, the regime in Eritrea, it's like a mafia kind of regime that follows you even wherever you are.
Right.
You are blackmailed. Even if you live in the United States, you have to pay 2% of your income tax that you have worked here in the US to the government of Eritrea. So there's a lot of things that they use against you. A lot of people are afraid, even after they left, fear of that there might be reprisals against their family in Eritrea. It has happened many times as well. So people are afraid to speak up against the government.
Right.
But now we see the last 5 years, I see a lot of young people are joining the opposition groups. More and more are opposing. Before, when we had demonstrations, peaceful protests, it was like 40, 50 people, but now we see hundreds, and there were times that we have seen even thousands. Okay. So I'm very hopeful.
Yeah. So, and it really takes kind of those pioneers like yourself to face the fear and get out there, and then over time people will join you. So that has to be, really hopeful and promising to you that more people are joining that. That's really good to hear. That's really good to hear. So to continue to shed light on the refugees and ask the world to stand with you against the torture, are you seeing the world respond in a more positive way as well now? Other countries. It sounds like what you're saying is Eritrean refugee groups all over the world are starting to gather together and really work together. Are you seeing other governments really start to pick up the call to stand against the repression?
Sadly, no. That's the thing. A lot of atrocities has happened to Eritrean refugees, and it's still happening right now.
Right.
I'm sure you don't even know, or no one knows that just about 2 months ago, 39 Eritrean refugees were beheaded by ISIS in Libya. This is something, even the media is very discriminating in reporting about the issues that's happening. So you have to be worthy to report on it, sadly. And that's what has been happening with the kidnapping and torture in the Sinai. While 10,000 of my people died because they couldn't pay ransom, it was never reported. The whole world was quiet about it because we are Eritreans, nobody cares about us. The media is the same thing, So I used to, normally you lobby governments, and I used to lobby journalists. I used to write to every journalist in the world that I could think of, could cover the issue of the kidnapping and the torture that was happening in Sinai at that time.
Right.
And everybody would say, oh, it's really sad, but this wouldn't sell. So it wasn't. Or some editors-in-chief would tell me, but we covered it last year. But it's still happening. You have to cover it every year, just like you do in Syria. We talk about Syrian issues on a daily basis.
Right.
Why not talk about Eritreans the same way? But there is no interest. So.
Right. So it sounds like what you're saying, though, is that you're seeing, more of the protests, more activists from the Eritrean community start to rise up, which is very hopeful. And then there's this need for the world to really stand up against what's happening. What do you see as, kind of bridging that gap in your mind?
I think first is awareness.
Awareness, yes.
That's the whole purpose with making the film Sound of Torture was. I'm very happy with the outcome that the film have managed to raise awareness throughout the world. I've met people from Argentina, Mexico that recognized me from the film and saying, I saw you on TV in Mexico, I saw you in Argentina.
Okay.
So it's really nice when people, the same thing, This American Life did a radio documentary about me 2 years ago, and I met this woman somewhere else in Europe, and she said, are you Meron? And I thought she saw the film, but it was like my picture from the website. So it's cool that through different means, at least people are getting aware. So once you are aware, then I think anybody that have conscience cannot just ignore.
Exactly. Once you've seen, you can't just close your eyes to it.
Exactly,
so, and I totally agree with you about the awareness. So let's talk about Sound of Torture. You mentioned that, and so that's the whole reason you're in Boise, Idaho, right? To be on tour, so to speak, with Sound of Torture right now. So let's go back to the beginning. When was it filmed? You shared with me it took 3 years to complete that, which is such an investment and just such a really honoring that this is an important issue that needs addressed, that it would be such a good film made about this. So just share with me kind of the genesis of Sound of Torture and how it came together.
As I said, every Thursday I have my radio program, Voices of Eritrean Refugees, and so Eritrean refugees in Israel do listen to my program on a weekly basis, and they go to Eritrean restaurants where they hang out, and so they're always listening. So Keren Shayo, the director, she was researching to make a film about missing people. So she happened to like Eritrean food. And used to visit the Eritrean restaurants. So she noticed every Thursday people were getting really depressed listening to my program. So she asked, why is everybody depressed? And they said, oh, it's a radio program. We're listening to people that are being held hostage, and this woman is interviewing them. So she asked more about me, and she wanted to get in touch with me. So she got in touch with me. At that time I was talking already to other people that wanted to follow me around, do the work. So Keren contacted me, and I think before we even discussed about a film, she already started. So when she called me, I told her I'm on my way to Israel, which she lives in Israel. And so at the airport, she said, yeah, well, I'll pick you up at the airport. I said, you don't have to, because it's 4 a.m. that I'm arriving, but she insisted. So when I went there, she was there already with a camera. Started filming before we even discussed on.
Oh wow!
So.
But that just shows, her heart and her passion. So, which I'm sure you appreciate when you meet people. That
I think we just clicked, and she was the right person. And she cared so much.
That's such a great story. So tell me just a little digression. Eritrean restaurants. So what are some of your favorite dishes?
I love Eritrean food. What else do I like? I think anything spicy.
Anything? Okay.
Anything I like Mexican food.
Indian. A connection there, across the world. There you go. That's great. So tell us what you're hoping to accomplish with Sound of Torture. You talked about how it's raising awareness. So is your goal just to get as many people in the world to see it as possible? And how are you kind of going about that?
Actually we have reached more people than we had expected when the film was being made. There were about 5-6 TV stations that already contributed to the making of the film. So we were happy enough that we had 6 countries, state TVs that were going to show the broadcast the film. But then, to our surprise, more and more countries, almost in Europe, it has been broadcasted in almost every country in Europe. And it won so many prizes that I cannot even count anymore. In so many film festivals. and it's still being screened all over the world in
Yeah.
different festivals, like here right now. So I'm really happy with the outcome. When the film first came out, there was a petition going on, and close to 1 million people signed actually within days, condemning what was happening in Egypt. I mean, the torture and the kidnapping.
Right.
So it was really, so it has had a big impact, much bigger than we had anticipated. Actually,
it was worth being followed around for 3 years.
Yes.
That's amazing. So tell me about, in the United States, in my country, has the awareness been growing? Have a lot of people seen it here? You mentioned Europe, and you mentioned Mexico, but what about the States?
Yes, it has been broadcasted in many states. PBS has broadcasted it many times. I think it's about like 4 or 5 states have broadcasted it, but I don't think all over.
Okay.
Yeah, so we hope that it would be broadcasted in more states and more people know about it. This American Life has done a radio documentary about it. It was very popular, and they're thinking to do a rerun again. So I'm happy, and I hope that there will be more awareness.
Right.
As well.
So, and I think as you look through history and see movements in the human rights area, you definitely see awareness is always the first step. Exactly. So for you, kind of what's the next step? Because it sounds like you're really building the awareness. It sounds like you're really starting to see more activists and more protesters come together against the repression in Eritrea, which is a great step. But for you, what's next after awareness? What do you want that to lead to for an average person, like me, like the people here in the States? We're just average, ordinary people. Yeah. So once we're aware, what do you hope that leads to?
For instance, I mean, you can raise this awareness that you get with, you can contact your representatives to do something about it.
Right.
Resettlement for the Eritrean refugees that have to go through so much horrible journey. I believe they don't have to go through that if we can manage to bring these people to a safe place without them having to go through. A woman will get raped at least 3 times until she reaches her final destination, for instance. Knowing this, but still a woman takes the journey. Some people get kidnapped 2 or 3 times, paid ransom many times, and then at the end they can drown in the Mediterranean Sea. So it's just too much for us Eritreans. Tragedy has become like a daily thing that we have gotten used to it.
Right.
That every time we read in a newspaper or the media is talking about a boat drowned, so we are certain that at least half of them, if not the whole of them, are Eritreans. And it's a sad thing that every day you get used to it, and then at the end of the day your body becomes numb, and you just say rest in peace and you move on until what comes next, and next day comes another thing.
Right.
So to add through all that, now we have ISIS in Libya that are expanding, kidnapping hundreds of Eritrean women, making them their slaves there, and beheading the men because they refuse to convert. It has happened over 3 times that we know of.
That you know
and
of.
There are more that we don't know of. So I get this information whenever somebody manages to escape. That's when you find out 2 months later or 3 months later when one manages. So last week there was 2 women that managed to escape after being held hostages by ISIS for 6 months. They had to convert, and then they were given as a gift to one woman to each soldier that fights for ISIS.
Right.
And then that man decides over whether if he is going to sell her off or keep her as his wife or as his slave or whatever. This is how the women are living. And sadly, many of them were pregnant and had given birth, and so you can just imagine to add up through all the problems that you have gone through, and then now we have ISIS to worry of. At least in the Sinai, we could pay ransom and rescue the people. But with ISIS, there is no negotiation.
Right.
It's not like when they negotiate, when they kidnap an American, they probably ask like millions of millions, but with us, they don't do that. It's just convert or die. And,
just given that choice and no negotiation, as you say. That's it. So it's so hard to to even believe, sitting here, this nice place, it's so hard to believe that that's the reality for so many people.
Yeah.
And I just thank you so much for, coming to the States. I'm sure you've been here many times to raise awareness. And there's definitely some signs of hope. It sounds like what you're saying for the situation, which is great. And I think, here in Boise, my community, I found that people are just so passionate about justice, and when there's something that you see that you can do, I believe people answer that call. If you just hear about, this terrible problem that's happening on the other side of the world, it's hard to know what to do, but you're making it accessible for us to understand it. And like you say, to talk to our representatives, if there's Eritrean refugees, in our communities, to make sure that they're helped, which is such a transition in itself.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking about people that get to freedom, I mean, they've gone through 3 or 4 lifetimes already that at times have been hell.
Yeah.
So, so thank you so much for your care for these people and your passion and your bravery and your courage.
Thank you.
So, if you could just, what's your last word for again, people like me, just average people, we have full lives, we have families, we have our life here in the United States. What do you want us to know more than anything else?
I think to remember that all lives are equal.
Yes.
That everyone's life should matter regardless of whether if you're American or non-American, what color you have or what religion you have shouldn't matter, because we are all human beings at the end.
Right.
And we should feel responsible for for the mankind in order to survive.
Right.
And to
the blessings we have to use to bless other people.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So many of the torture survivors, for example, the Eritreans, have been resettled to the United States. Most of them have psychologically they are not feeling well. They need people. So even if you feel that it's far away, you can engage with, as you said, with Eritrean refugees. I'm sure they are in Idaho as well.
Even in Idaho, you think?
Yeah, they're all over.
Yeah. So, okay.
So you can engage with them and do some community service. There are organizations, American
Yes.
organizations, helping Eritrean refugees abroad. So you can join the organizations or help out. One of them is America Team for Displaced Eritreans.
Okay.
They have a website, eritreanrefugees.org. They are based in Philadelphia, and they do amazing work here and also in Sudan and in Ethiopia, helping Eritrean refugees.
That's wonderful work.
Yeah.
That's wonderful work. And yeah, when you realize it's in your community, you can help somebody. I mean, that brings it home.
Yeah.
And then you realize, I mean, we really are, as you said, we are all equal.
Yeah.
We all matter, and we all have something that can help another person.
Yeah,
so
true.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. This
My
is
pleasure.
a true honor for Our Voice.
Thank you for having me.
And we hope you have a wonderful time here in Idaho.
Yeah,
So, thank you for joining us today. Here at Our Voice, we just want to tell stories that matter. We want to be a voice for the voiceless, and we want to encourage our Voice community to join us on Facebook, where we have more information, more information about the Eritrean refugees and how you can be involved. So we just want to thank all of you for watching us here on Our Voice. We just love being here in downtown Boise at the Grove Hotel and bringing to you stories that matter of amazing people. Have a great day.